Good morning, everyone. I am excited to welcome you to the June Business Boost for the Middleton Chamber. My name is Kristen Parent. We're super excited to have all of you guys here today. I want to give a shout out and a thank you to our sponsors today who absolutely make these programs possible. We are so fortunate to have the support of TDS, Park Bank, and the QTI Group. So a couple of notes on housekeeping. We would ask that you keep your microphone on mute today during the presentation. We're going to have a question and answer session at the end. So we'll, if you have something, a question that pops up, please feel free to put that in the chat and we'll capture those and then hold them till the end. We do ask cameras on if that's at all possible. It's lovely to see your faces out there and know you're there. And you may have noticed that I started talking that the closed caption is coming up on the bottom of your screen. So please feel free to use that if that's a service that you prefer. And if not, there is a way to hide those subtitles. So you can do that as well. So with that, I would love to welcome our speaker today, Aleta Norris. She is the co-founder of Living as a Leader, a leadership training, coaching, and consulting firm that was formed in 2002. She's been involved in supporting the growth and effectiveness of leaders for over 30 years. A lifelong Wisconsin resident, she grew up near us here in Monroe and has been in Milwaukee since 1987. She is married with 5 adult children and a golden doodle named Luke, and we just learned 2 grandbabies are on the way. Aleta and her business partner, Nancy Lewis, named their company Living as a Leader because what they teach applies at work, at home as leaders of your families, and in the communities you serve. So much of what Aleta will talk about today will apply effectively at home or at work. So Aleta, I would love to turn this over to you.
Okay, Kristen, thank you so much. Everybody, welcome. I'm very happy to be here. And as Kristen and I talked about, what we might talk about today, I suggested a topic that over the years has been very well received by audiences. It is 7 common mistakes that leaders make have been born out of our work with thousands of leaders over the past 2 decades. And we have, of course, as a result of working with leaders, received so much feedback from the employees whom these leaders serve. And so we have essentially packaged this up and we're able to replay it back to you to give you insight into kind of at the end of the day, what fundamentally really matters to the employees whom you in fact support. So what I would love to do is, I think given our time, I've got about, so let's see, Kristen, I'm going to do a time check. I have until about 10:30, right? And then we'll shift over to, we'll call it Q&A/conversation, because I'm so happy for you to share insights, for you to share with one another. And so after I give you a foundation of information that you can use as a starting point, we'll then turn it over to you and let you bring it even more to life. So let's talk about why your leadership even matters. So one of the things that we recognize is that across the US, about 1/3 of our workforce feels fully engaged in the work they do. And that includes how they feel about working for you as their leader, for those of you who are leaders of people, and for your organization. We also know that employees want to know their managers as people. And in fact, one of our mistakes is lack of humility. We do have leaders who show up with an ego and they try to guard this persona that they're somehow more important than the people they lead, and therefore don't want to let their guard down. We know, in fact, though, that employees want you to interact with them as if you are one of them, while at the same time having the privilege of leading the work that they're there to perform. This is one of my favorite kind of research points. 69% of American workers would work harder if they were better appreciated. And there's a really simple phrase that we use, and that is, what gets rewarded gets repeated. And this matters so much to us, to support the employee's need for acknowledgement, that we encourage leaders to thank their employees for remaining with them as an employee, for choosing them as their employer, and even for coming to work and being reliable and doing what's being asked of them. We've had so many leaders over the years say, are you, like, seriously, are you kidding me? I need to thank people for doing what I'm paying them to do. And the answer is, well, yes, because if you do it, you increase their level of satisfaction and you increase the likelihood that they will stay with you. We also know that, you know, a lot of members of our younger generations are much more inclined to move around. So 23% of new hires will leave within the first year. And the reason they do that is because they are disappointed in their experience, or they are underwhelmed by the environment that they have become a part of. And so the onus really is on you as the employer and as the leader of these people to make sure that you are providing a positive experience for people, one in which they want to stay. So 65% of workers would rather, many of them, well, 65%, that's a pretty big number, would rather have a better boss than more pay. All right. So according to research, the number one reason that people leave their jobs is because they're dissatisfied with their leader. And so a way that you can increase their satisfaction is to you yourself become a better leader, or you, as a leader in your organization, be committed to helping the leaders in your organization become better. Okay. And in fact, one of the things that we really appreciate is that leaders of organizations, CEOs and presidents and executive level leadership, they now are much more inclined to view investment in their people as a capital investment. Whereas 30 years ago, when I started this work, it was still referred to as the soft stuff and soft skills. And by the way, I encourage you not to call interpersonal skill development, I encourage you not to call it soft skills, because it just sends the wrong message to people. So instead, it is a capital investment. It is strategic. It is non-negotiable that you are investing in your people. All right. So let's take a look at the 7 mistakes that we're going to cover. And I'm just going to pop them up here so you can have a glance at the list. I won't read the list for you. And then we'll go ahead and take a look at these one at a time. Now, we don't have time today to both kind of bring awareness to the mistake and then solve the mistake. I will, however, give you some insight so that you have at least, I think, enough inspiration that you can decide if you would like to take action. So let's talk about this first mistake, and that is leaders avoid addressing key issues with employees. Now, a key issue can be described as, let's call it an unmet expectation. So you have an employee who's not performing, you have an employee who perhaps is behaving in a way that's difficult for the people around him or her. And so they're not showing up in the way you need them to. We have so many leaders who avoid that conversation. And of course, you know, by now you've probably looked at this list. So many people say, oh, I just don't like confrontation, or I don't know what to say. A lot of leaders say well, I just hope it goes away. And hope isn't a strategy. And this is where it really matters that you as a leader and the leaders in your organization have the skills to address these conversations. So here I'm going to give you a couple of ideas that might help you. So when something isn't going the way you want, there's 2 sides to the story. There's the side that you're observing, and then there's whatever is going on their side of the equation that you might not know about. So we encourage leaders when they're struggling with disappointment over an employee, we encourage you to lead with curiosity. And the best way to lead with curiosity is to ask questions. So there's a really simple formula you can use. It's called F plus Q. F plus Q. And that stands for fact plus question. That's your formula. So let's imagine you have an employee who's missed a deadline. And you can say to them, hey, this project was due at 3 o'clock today. It's now 5 o'clock. What happened? Okay. The fact is they missed the deadline. The question, what happened? And by the way, what happened is my very favorite question in the world because it applies to almost everything. And incidentally, for those of you on this call who are parents and have family leadership as a part of your kind of daily existence, this stuff really works at home. So I'll give you an example. My oldest daughter right now is 32, but when she was 16 years old, there was one particular night when she missed curfew. And over the course of like 90 minutes, I could not get a hold of her on her cell phone. And so I went from, being frustrated with her, and then I was very worried. And as a parent, I was, very afraid that something happened. And then when she pulled into the driveway, then I went back to being just kind of mad at her again for being late. So she came to the door and I said, young lady, I said, you are late. You go up to bed and we will talk about this in the morning. And she said, Mom, you didn't even ask me what happened. And I said, don't be using my stuff on me. No, I said, you know what? You're absolutely right. So what happened? And she told me what had happened. And turns out she was helping someone. Her phone got left behind and she had a story that had validity to it. And she deserved to be able to share that story. Your employees deserve to share a story. Your children deserve to share a story. Service providers who let you down or contractors who are no-shows, they deserve to have a story, even if at the end of the story, it isn't valid in your book, right? And then you can decide what your consequence is going to be. There is a process we use. It is called the 6-step process to have a difficult conversation. And it includes an invitation to have the conversation. When you sit down, the first formal step is, hey, thanks for taking time to have this conversation. Step number 2 is to set the stage. And by the way, I'm going to give you a link to download this 6-step process, so you don't have to scramble to write it all down. Step number 2 is to simply set the stage. The reason I wanted to talk with you is I've got a concern over a pattern of behavior related to your performance, and I want to share that with you. Step number 3 is you share your observations factually. Step number 4, you ask a question. What can you tell me about this? And that puts us into what we call the conversation box, where they get to share what's going on. You get to ask more questions to understand. And then ultimately in step number 6, you get to decide what the consequence will be or what the outcome will be or what the next step will be. What I love about this process is no one ever has to be mad. No one ever has to be disrespectful or demeaning or diminishing to another human being. And so again, it's called the 6-step process. And in fact, Kristen, if you want to go back up early in our chat and just grab that link for the 6-step process, you all can grab that. It's just a free guide for you to have that in front of you. Okay, so let's go ahead and move on to the next mistake. And the next mistake is that many leaders give too much negative feedback. And one of the reasons it feels to employees like too much negative feedback is because a lot of leaders don't give feedback unless something's wrong. And so we call that the leave alone zap technique. Leave alone zap. So I'm going to leave you alone as long as you're doing what I need you to do. But as soon as you're not doing what I need you to do, you're going to hear from me. And that leaves employees feeling like, what the heck? Like, what about all the times I am doing the right thing? Why am I not hearing you then? To which a lot of leaders will respond, well, that's what you're supposed to be doing, right? One supervisor a number of years ago said to me, well, I thought that's what my job was to catch people doing something wrong and to get them back on track again. Well, it is your role to a degree. We have to make sure we're balancing that out, though, by sharing positive feedback. So that leads us to mistake number 3, the absence of positive feedback. Now, this one, if you can overcome this mistake, and in fact, this is something I would like to have conversation with you about after we've kind of laid this foundation. So if you can overcome the absence of positive feedback, it fundamentally changes the experience that people have around you. It changes how employees feel about their experience on your team and in your organization. It changes the way your children feel about living as a member of your family and as a part of your family culture. And so when we begin a development process with a group of leaders, in the very first, well, the very first workshop that we deliver is in fact this title, The 7 Most Common Mistakes Leaders Make. And we send leaders away with an assignment to give a minimum of 5 people intentional positive feedback every day. So 5 employees. Now these can be people on your team. These can be peers. These can be, this can include your own leader. This can include another senior level leader in your organization. It can be a service provider. It can be one of your children. It can be a spouse. Build a habit of catching people doing things right and acknowledging it to them. So in other words, you're saying, listen, I saw how you did that, and I want you to know that you handled that really well. You handled that situation well. You handled that conversation well. Or you might say to one of your reliable employees or team members, it could be a team member's, a peer. You could say, one of the things I recognize about you is that you are consistently reliable. You are here, you do what I ask you to do, or you do what our team needs from you. You just don't let us down. And I want you to know that that does not go unnoticed by me. Now, let's flip over to home leadership for a moment. So as Kristen shared, I have 5 adult children. Well, I happen to have raised 3 of them. Okay, the other 2 are my bonus children. Well, I raised 3 children mostly as a single mom. And I made it a habit to have them not only hear from me when they left their cereal bowl on the table, or they left their shoes in the middle of the room, or they came home late. They heard from me when they did put their cereal bowl in the dishwasher, when they didn't leave their shoes in the middle of the room, and when they did come home on time. So what they heard was, thank you for putting your bowl in the dishwasher. Thank you for not leaving your shoes. Because what gets rewarded gets repeated. This is a decision. And one of the thoughts that I like people to give consideration to is, in your life, do you want to be a day maker or do you want to be a day breaker? Do you want to be someone who raises people up and has them feeling good about themselves? We call those people day makers. Or do you want to be somebody who looks for every opportunity to put people in their place or bust them or catch them doing something wrong? Like, who do you want to be as a person? So I encourage that you look for opportunities to get positive feedback. Now, there are 4 elements to giving meaningful, positive feedback. And the first element is that you choose your method. Do you want to do it verbally in passing? Do you want to schedule a time? Do you want to write a card? Do you want to send an email? Do you want to do it publicly in a meeting? Do you want to put it in a newsletter? How do you want to give feedback? The second element is, what specifically are you giving feedback on? So we don't want attaboys. We don't just want, hey, you know, great job. We want great job. I particularly appreciated how detailed you were in your analysis and how cooperatively you worked with the other two people on your team, right? So let's be specific. The third thing is to share the impact. Because of what you did, others in the organization are looking favorably upon us as a team. Okay. And thank you. You know, you deserve credit for that. So what's the impact? And then finally, ask a question to involve them in the conversation. So it might be, I'm just curious, with all the things you have on your plate, how are you able to pull this off? Because that gives your employees an opportunity to share something with you that maybe you didn't know. Maybe they're going to say, well, I worked 2 evenings this week, or I came in on Saturday. I just needed a day when it was quiet. And as a leader, you can say, I had no idea of that. And thank you so much. That's, you know, that's above and beyond. This is really important. So I'm going to have Kristen share another link with you. And we have an email series. It's a 7-day email series called Feedback Made Easy. And it gives you some insightful, you know, ideas around sharing feedback. And it does include those 4 elements that I just spoke of. Now, this next mistake is much more common than it should be, and that's disrespectful treatment of people. Each one of us has to take responsibility to not be a person who disrespects, disregards, demeans, diminishes, or demoralizes another person. It's just not right. And I marvel at the number of adults in our organizations who mistreat adults in our organizations. I don't get it. I don't think there's a place for it. And any leader, or any human for that matter, who still comes to work and raises their voice, or does name calling, or uses profanity, or says things like, I don't care, or interrupts people, there's not a place for it. And this is one of those things that people have to get a handle on. Now, there are also organizations who harbor bullies. And the reason they do is because their bullies are high performing. Well, they're our best sales guy and they're great with the customer. And my response is, I don't care. If they're great with the customer, but they come back to your team and they bully people in the spirit of taking care of the customer, I don't care, because you're allowing another person to adversely affect the quality of life of human beings in your organization, and you're sending them home broken at the end of the day. You're sending, you know, adults who have parents that they're taking care of and children who respect them, and you're diminishing them at work. So no place for that. And there's a phrase that comes out of a book written by Daniel Goleman, who's kind of known as the father of emotional intelligence. And I think the book is called Emotional Intelligence. And it's out of control emotions make smart people stupid. I cannot tell you how many executives I've coached over the years who are, well, let's just call it what it is. Some of them are assholes, and they are just not good people. And what I want them to understand is you are the one who looks like an idiot, right? And so for all of your people who are coming to me because you're adversely affecting their life, I don't know what else to tell them other than that you are someone that, you know, they could leave. I think that's one of the pieces of advice that I've often given people is just go somewhere different, right? Okay, so let's move on to number 5, and that is an imbalance of accountability and inspiration. Now, each one of you here, and each one of you who are maybe catching the recording, will be by your nature wired toward one side of the scale or another. About 50% of our population is wired toward accountability and getting stuff done. It's like, that's why we're here. We're here to get stuff done. All right. So the more you work and the more you let me work and the more we don't have a lot of hallway chatter, the happier I'm going to be. And then we've got part of the population, about 50% wired toward that inspiration. They have an innate gene within them that has them caring about the human experience. I do care how things affect you. I do want to know your opinions. I want to chat with you. I want to learn the names of your children. I want to know what you did for your vacation. I want to know if you enjoyed it, right? Sometimes the inspiration people are too easy on the accountability side and give people a bit too much freedom to underperform. Sometimes the accountability people send too much of a message of, I don't care about you. You're here simply to do work. So a well-balanced leader is somebody who recognizes that the other side of the scale is important and are willing to do some things intentionally, right? So as an example, we may have an accountability person to ask, well, how was your weekend? What you have to know, if you know they're on the accountability side, is they're going to want your answer to be brief, right? They're fine is a really good answer when an accountability person asks you how your weekend was. An inspiration person might want to know, well, on Friday night we did this, and on Saturday we did this, and on Sunday we did this, right? So kind of know your audience, but also be willing yourself to stretch the rubber band to the other side. Now, mistake number 6 is getting caught up in doing, not leading. So many leaders, in fact, almost most leaders, are leaders of people because they were good performers. They were the best performers. And so now they've come over to a leadership role. A lot of these leaders still pride themselves on single-handedly what they can do. Or we can see these people also have kind of a, oh, just let me do it myself, right? Let's imagine you turn a project over to them that they did, and as you're going through it, you're noticing things that need attention. Well, it's just easier to do it yourself rather than coaching your employee to up-level that result so that they can do a better job the next time. And certainly a lot of leaders are heads down working on their own stuff because most leaders are working leaders. And so what happens is when they're in their office working and one of their employees comes to the door, sometimes it's like, now what do you need? Like, I'm busy, I'm working, I have a lot of stuff to do. Well, yes, and you are a leader of people, and being a leader of people has its own set of responsibilities. And so this list right here, scheduling leadership, gives leaders some insight into what actually do I do as a leader, but beyond just doing the work that I do. Okay, so this is real intentional. When a leader comes into a development process, they don't necessarily know what do I need to be doing aside from react to the person who's coming to my door or solve the problem or put the fire out. What do I do proactively as a leader? And so development puts those skills and tools in the toolbox. Okay, and then finally, mistake number 7, which is lack of humility. I alluded to that a bit earlier. There's no room for arrogance in leadership. There's just no room for it. People do not want to work for someone who believes they're the smartest person in the room. They don't want to work for someone who thinks they're all that. They don't want to work for someone who's not willing to have some vulnerability, or, you know, as we see in this list, to admit weaknesses and mistakes. I've got a leader that I've worked with in Alabama, and he's such a wonderful leader, and he has a team of about 15 leaders who report to him. They're a manufacturing company, and he's just so personable, and he puts himself on an even level. And recently he was in a meeting with the team and something had gone wrong, and this general manager of the facility said, oh my gosh, you guys, so you know, and they're not a blame oriented culture, but he said, who made this decision? And someone on the team said, well, sir, with all due respect, you did. And he said, oh, that was a really bad decision, right? And it's not every leader who's able to do that, who says, hey, I own that. That's on me. I also have worked with far too many leaders who will take the credit of their team and who will pass blame onto their team. Well, that's so-and-so's fault. No, as a leader, you take the responsibility for the failures and you give your team credit for the successes. That's what a humble leader does. So this one is, this one's near and dear to me. And unfortunately, within the composition of some of us, there's a fear of letting our guard down. And I want to underscore for all of you that your employees and even your children are much more likely to respect you if you let your guard down and allow yourselves to be imperfect, just as they are. So as I get ready to go ahead and stop sharing my screen, I would like for each of you to think about one thing that you heard or read on a slide that was an aha for you. It's like, oh yeah, I hadn't thought about that before. Or gosh, that's a really good reminder. Now, another thing that you might think about is what of these mistakes that we talked about, what is a mistake that you're making? And I don't want you to feel bad if you're making almost all of them, because there are a lot of people in leadership who are making almost all of them. And it's not intentional. There's no malicious intent. It's simply, I hadn't thought about it before. It's not something that was on my radar. Like, oh my gosh, I'm making that mistake too. So be prepared to share an aha. Maybe we'll do a bit of a lightning round. An aha that you picked up and one of the mistakes that you would like to give attention to. Now, one of the things that I want to share with you, and it's why I'm putting my email address up here. Anytime I speak, if there's someone who's been, part of our time together, and you have a situation and you would like to gain my insight or have a bit of a conversation about it, or gosh, do I ever have a situation that I'm struggling with? I wonder, Aleta, if you could help me. Feel free to reach out to me. I'm very happy to help you as a courtesy of us being together today.